My name is Glenn O'Milda. I'm here this evening to take in what what was programmed as. But I've been in a community for about 30 years, actively involved with the community, and I've been to a lot of puvalos. I've been to a lot of Hawaiian activism and sovereignty groups try to come up with a set of government structure. But I think what's going to happen. I think what's going to happen tonight is how we're going to approach this, because we've been through the exercises before. Right now, I see the community. We got to come down to the community level. That's where the power. Government is rampant. They're doing all kind of development, and we're not involved. So what I gather, I hope comes out from this is a cultural policy on how we see development in the region, because right now, the policy that the government, the city, and the state, they only kind of just glide over the surface of what the policy should be. But as we go into the policy, how do we see the protection and care of cultural sites and assets? This is important, because there's nothing in government document except highlighting the surface. Yeah, we want to protect government Hawaiian cultural assets. We want to protect, but that's superficial. We got to get down into the weeds and say, you know what? We got to have a policy that when documents, development, construction come aboard, this is what the Hawaiian community desires to have done. In other words, EISs, the land, water, ocean, all these things, trails that are Hawaiian assets. We got to take care and protect those assets. Right now, there's nothing in a government document, development plans. There's nothing in there that protects. They have policies that you should do this. A developer, when you come into the community, you got to do A, B, and C. Right now, there's nothing in there. So I want to know where this meeting is going tonight. That's why I'm here. I've been with all these activists, and we have nothing done. But now I think he got a chance, because this is a community level, a base neighborhood board level. I think we can affect change, affect development, and to prescribe some kind of policy statement and say, government, you got to respect the Hawaiian rights, and this is the policy that we recommend on any development, land uses, anything, that we got to go above, under, to see what is there that we can protect.
And your name again?
Glenn O'Milda, O-A-M-I-L-D-A.
And if anybody would like to get in touch with you, you have an email?
Yeah, my email is iamkanakatu, Yahoo.
Mahalo. Thank you very much.
Right on. Aloha.
Aloha, everybody, and welcome to the Sovereignty Conversation, the community forums. This is a series of forums which is going to be held on the third Tuesday of each month throughout the year of 2014. I'd like to welcome you to the first one, and hope that you really get involved. Let me tell you that these series, for the first 3 months, we're going to be talking about history, and tonight's program is going to be entirely about history. After we get through the first couple of months, we'll move on to a discussion of various forms of sovereignty, models of nationhood. And what we're going to be doing at that time is really try and give everybody who has a model of nationhood a chance to present it. What we're saying then is, those people who don't want any sovereignty at all, let them speak their piece, and let us listen to them carefully. They've got something to say. Let's go on to discussing the model of the Indian tribe, kind of a Takabill model. That the people have something to say about that. They want that. Let's give them a chance to lay it all out. When we come to independence, let's hear what the independence people have to say. And then we're going to, in this series, give people an open microphone. We're going to give them a real equal level platform where they can present their material. Now, a lot of you are aware that the Kana'i'olowalu registration ended yesterday. Part of the legislation, the enabling legislation for the Kana'i'olowalu process, the sign-up of Native Hawaiians, stated that there must be a Native Hawaiian Convention. So we're coming then between the sign-up and the convention, and what we're trying to do is really educate people so that candidates can really know what they're talking about, the people who are going to elect them can really know what they're talking about, and when the convention comes about, the people at the convention will understand what everybody is talking about. We want you to know that these series are directed at Hawaiians and non-Hawaiians. This Hawaiian sovereignty is going to affect everybody, and we need to get everybody involved. And so our invitation will go out again and again to please ask your friends who are Hawaiians and non-Hawaiians to listen to what's going on. This is really, really important. At this time, I'd like to introduce Poka Laenui. No, wait a minute, I think I'm going to be, okay, let me do Poka. Poka is going to tell us a little short story. Short?
I am Poka Laenui. I've also been known as Hayden Burgess. I come out from Wai'anae, graduated from Wai'anae High School back in 1964, participated in student politics, went to the University of Hawaii, and graduated in 1968 in political science. During that period of time, I tried to take every course I could dealing with Hawaiian history, Hawaiian culture. At that time, if many of you remember, that even Hawaiian language was in the foreign language department at the University of Hawaii. I developed into a very proud, honorable, loyal American citizen, like many of you. I ran for political office, one of the youngest, in 1966 for the school board, when the school board was first an elective office. I didn't win. Then I ran for the State Constitutional Convention, 1968. I represented the community of Wai'anae. Always a loyal American citizen. After that, my intention was to go to law school, got into George Washington University, didn't have enough money, had to come back, and so I decided to fulfill my responsibility as an American citizen, and I joined the United States military, the Air Force, to participate in a war in Vietnam. While I was stationed at Hickam Air Force Base, during the lunch hour, I went to the Hickam Library. And being very curious, I walked along the library shelves and I saw a book. And that book was Hawaii's Story by Hawaii's Queen, 1970, 1971. I had never seen that book before. And while wearing the uniform of the United States Air Force, I sat down and I began to read a history of Hawaii that I had never read before. It was sort of like the Queen coming back over a period of time and speaking to me. And as I read that story, I asked myself, what am I wearing that uniform, being willing to fight for that same country in that same military force that the Queen is talking about, who came into Hawaii and overthrew our nation. Just the idea of Hawaiian nationhood was foreign to me, having been educated throughout my lifetime in an Americanized system. And then I read a second book, Lawrence Fuchs' Hawaii Pono, which talks about the social and economic evolution after they overthrew our government. I became so angry. On one hand, being a proud American citizen, like many of you, whether it's in this audience or out in television land, and then to come to a realization that they lied to us. Many of us have come to that realization in different ways. When I came across that information, I became so angry, I began to plot to kill every American I could find. I began to plot to blow up buildings because I was in a rage. The word terrorism was not familiar to me at that time, but if it had been, then I would have been a terrorist. But I knew that for me, I would not be successful in changing the system, nor would I be successful in bringing about the pono that we deserve. So I decided that I would go into the system and try to blow up the system with truth, with justice, with history, using the words of their own American president to tell the story of Hawaii's history. But I promised myself I would never salute the American flag again. I was court-martialed while in the Air Force for refusal to obey a lawful command. After I got out, I went to law school at the University of Hawaii, got a law degree, and committed never to work for government or for major corporations. And as a result, I have followed a different path to continue to explode the system by going inside and talking about the truth of our history, to get on radio, to get on television, to get into any audience, to go into the homes, into the schools, and talk about and try to explode the myth that has been going on for too long, that the United States is justified in being in Hawaii today. I tell you that story so that many people resist. Oh, here goes the Hawaiians talking about sovereignty again, and they're all grumbling with one another, etc., etc. No, there is pono in the story. There is truth in the story. We disagree about different things. But the fundamental story is there, the fundamental truth is there, and all we need to do is just let truth be told, and let the truth really set us free. So that is the purpose of my brief remarks to you. Thank you very much for your audience. And now, Mehana.
Thank you for that powerful story, Poka. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we're going to have an MC who is really skilled at this. She has done it many times, and I think we're all going to enjoy having her. She's got a great personality, and I think she's really going to be able to move this program along, keep us on schedule. Her name is Mehana Hind, and I'd like to invite her to come to the stage. Thank you.
Aloha mai ka koe na kukuna na mākua na po'e aloha aina. Aloha. My name is Mehana Hind. I hail from the island of Pololo, from the Ahukua of Waikiki on this island of Oahu. And I come out to Kapolei as under a request for Kokua to help move and facilitate this process of education for the community that's in this audience and for all of you in here. Know also that people are watching this live on Olelo Channel 53 at this moment. Yeah, so this is a live broadcast of tonight's events. And that's good to know. And it will be shown later at different times also. Yeah. So Maikai Mahalo ya Olelo. Thank you also to the Kapolei Neighborhood Board, who is hosting, again, one of 12 educational opportunities on the topic of sovereignty. Tonight, our guests that have come forward, I have a lot of deep aloha for, because they have been in the discussions, in the movement, you just mentioned the issue of self-governance and sovereignty and self-determination, and these names will float to the top of the list, some of them here tonight. And we have to mahalo that we have this opportunity with them and some time with them. Of course, you have already seen Poka Laenui, and let me just explain a little bit of background of who he is. He's known as an attorney, and a sovereignty leader, but he also currently works at Halina Aupono. He's the executive director, helping this side of the island in particular, the west side of our island, with our people to get them healed. And so mahalo nui for that work. We're also going to be joined by Kumu Jon Osorio from the University of Hawaii at Manoa, the Center for Hawaiian Studies, Ho'inuiakea School of Hawaiian Knowledge. And He also wears many hats and has contributed to the greater discussion of self-determination over the years, and he will be, never ceases to amaze us with what he brings forth. We're also going to be joined by Palani Vaughan tonight, who's going to share his knowledge of especially the kingdom and the music that comes from that area, and especially the time period where Kalakaua is reigning. And then we're going to be joined later on by three of our other guests, our retired Major General, Butch Correa, our trustee of the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, Peter Apo, and Mike Haina here, Uilani Keliikuli, who is a professor at Leeward Community College, instructor at Leeward Community College. That's just future tense, so that you become, put it on to the university. Yeah, she's going to be a professor soon. And she teaches this side of the moku of Oahu. Yeah, she takes care of all of our haumana on this west coast here. So she has the undertaking of teaching them all Hawaiian studies. So mahalo ya uli for coming out tonight. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our next speaker. And that is Kumu Jonathan Osorio, again, who currently lives in the same place that I was raised, in the Ahupua of Waikiki, and teaches at the Center for Hawaiian Studies. And you can catch him playing gigs. If you're lucky to listen to him play music, that is also a treat, for all of us. Kumu Jon?
Aloha kako. It's good to see you all. It takes a long time to drive out here. Rush hour traffic, doesn't it? Yeah. I learned a lot today in the car about how other drivers drive and how I have to kind of mellow out. I'm not accustomed to making that drive. I'm stalling, by the way, while they put this PowerPoint on the screen. And I'm using a PowerPoint today to talk to you because I want to talk about something really specific. We've all been to these kinds of presentations before in which we've talked about the illegal overthrow, we've talked about the annexation that really wasn't an annexation, we've talked about what the United States did once it took control of this country. But one of the things that we don't spend a lot of time talking about is are some of the reasons why our country, our nation, became a victim of this takeover. And I'm going to focus on something very specific tonight and talk about economics. And economics doesn't have to be ridiculously boring or difficult to understand. If I can understand it, believe me, if I can understand this thing, anyone can. We're really just talking about money. And when you tell the story of the takeover of our country, you aren't really just talking about money. You're talking about racism. You're talking about a sense of privilege and white supremacy that really was a strong part that drove some of these people to conspire against our queen, against our government. We're talking about people who were citizens, subjects of the king, who had voting rights and privileges as men and guarded those privileges very jealously. We're talking about eventually getting these pictures up here so I can actually get started. But if we don't get them up, then I'm just going to tell the story. What is also true about Hawaii is that our lands and our resources and the labor of our people was taken over by a small group of people back in the middle of the 1800s. Hawaii had been a shelter to these men, and some of them were women. Hawaii had been a place where they could engage in business and make money and live comfortably. But for a number of these people, particularly connected to the sugar industry, comfort, a good position in the society, a business that was profitable was not enough. And as early as the 1860s, Many of these companies and individuals were running sugar plantations in places, all over the islands. And by the 1860s and 70s, even in Eva, began to use the kingdom's government in order to make more opportunities for themselves. The title of this talk is Ikapu'ukalao Kiaupuni. Who knows where this line comes from? Recognize this line? Kaumananapua. Yeah. Aolemakoa iminamina. Ikapu'ukalao Kiaupuni. We do not regret the loss of payment by this new government. We'd rather resign and support the Kalani. So that's what this basic message is that one of the driving forces for the takeover was really about money. You'll see here a kind of collage of different company activities. Castle and Cook, there's Mr. Cook's in that little circle on the right there. You can see the train that was built to carry and ferry sugar. You can see other kinds of activities. Next slide, please. Next slide. And I can't remember what's on the next slide, so I can't fix this up. We'll get there. Uh-oh. Okay, good. So one of the things I want to talk about is where these companies come from. And most of you probably know about the Mahele, about what is sometimes referred to as the great or not so great Mahele. This was, what happened is that during the early kingdom, about 6 or 7 years after the kingdom was actually formed as a legal government by the signature of Kaui Ke'uli, Kamehameha III, on the Constitution of 1840, just 6 or 7 years after this, the legislature of the kingdom and the leadership of the chiefs and Kaui Ke'uli himself basically agreed to create a land commission. The land commission was set up principally to try and settle differences that were arising between foreigners, mostly Hausa foreigners, and chiefs and people over land. And I can't go into great detail except to say that over the process of the 2 years from when the Land Commission was formed and when that Land Commission's job basically was supposed to end, we went to basically registering the land claims of some 257 ali'i and konohiki and chiefs and the king himself, Kaui Ke'uli. The lands were divided up among them. Maka'ainana were supposed to make claims on the lands on which they lived and the lands that they cultivated. And basically what was supposed to happen is that there was supposed to be a dividing out of the interests of the king, the ali'i, and the people of the land. And it all started basically with the Land Commission making this very, very important claim. And what they said was, all of the land is basically owned by 3 interests: the king, the konohiki, and the ho'aina or maka'aina. They have, each of these 3 entities has an equal but undivided interest in all the land. I think that's an amazing thing to begin with. And by the way, that interest, which really is enshrined in that declaration and in the laws that were passed by the kingdom in the 1840s, that interest has never gone away. One of the things that contemporary scholars and legal experts, lawyers, are beginning to look into is, when did we ever lose the right as Kanaka Maoli to claim our 1/3 interest in the land? By what law did we lose that right? No law passed by the kingdom ever erased the right or the essential interest, 1/3 interest, that each of us has in all of the land. Let's move on to the next one. But actually, let's go back to that slide. One of the things that did happen in this particular time was that officially, these chiefs and the Mo'i claimed most of the land in the kingdom. And either the land became the property of Genai Keliikuli as his private property, the property of these 256 other ali'i, or it became the property of the government. And Maka'ainana were supposed to claim their lands from any of these piles of lands, depending on where they lived. They were supposed to get their interest out of it. What we know happened is that not all Maka'ainana made claims. Of those who did make claims, only a portion were actually awarded. And in the end, only about less than 1% of the lands in this two or 3 year period actually were awarded to Maka'ainana, through the Kuleana Act or by deed. At the same time that Maka'ainana were supposed to be claiming lands, foreigners, non-Kanaka, were given the right to buy and sell lands by a specific act of the legislature that took place in July of 1850. An act, it's a very long title, but it says, an act to abolish the disabilities of aliens to acquire and convey lands in fee simple. The way this thing is worded is, so far, foreigners have suffered a disability of being able to buy and sell lands. We're going to end that disability. Why the kingdom did this is subject to much debate. My own theory is that the kingdom was interested in making foreigners conform to the laws of the kingdom. And foreigners up until that point had said over and over again, your laws don't apply to us. We don't belong to this kingdom. Your laws, you can make laws for your people all you want, for your chiefs, for your Maka'ainana, they don't apply to us. So this law came with a caveat. You can purchase lands in the kingdom, but if you don't obey the laws, you forfeit the land. You forfeit the land. It was an attempt, I think, to make Haole behave in the kingdom, and perhaps to some extent that may have worked. But it also opened up the doors. Next slide. It also, and the next slide after this, because we don't have time for that. Here is a diagram essentially of how the lands were initially arrayed. The ali'i taking, claiming and ultimately owning about 1/3. The Mo'i about approximately 1/4 of the lands. The government became a huge landowner, a legal landowner of more than 1.5 million acres of land. And you can't really see it, but there's a little slice of blue in there. Those are the lands that were actually deeded out to Maka'ainana under the Kuleana Act. Next slide. Now, let's go back to the last slide. The government lands tended to be held by the government, by the kingdom's government. And over the next 20, 30 years, in a series of auctions, they auctioned off, in some cases, thousands of acres of land specifically to Kanaka, specifically to Kanaka Maoli, and relatively inexpensively. So one of the things that we believe, and some people are really doing the research on this, is that Maka'ainana didn't fare as badly in the Mahele, in land ownership, as we originally believed. They bought lands, and they were permitted to buy lands, and in fact, they were targeted by the government to purchase lands on which to live. Most of the private property, the other thing is the crown lands. The king did sell lands, both Kamehameha III and Kamehameha IV. But by the time Kapuaiwa, Kamehameha V became king, the legislature moved to make the lands of the Mo'i inalienable. And they passed legislation that said that the king could not sell crown lands, he could only lease them or use them in other ways to generate money, but he couldn't sell them. So most of the land that was sold to Haole corporations came from the chiefs, came from the ali'i nui and ali'i who had claimed lands during the Mahele. And one of the things that we know is that Haole families and corporations very quickly bought up whatever lands were available. so that by 1886, almost 70% of all the private lands held in the kingdom were owned by foreign individuals and corporations. That's a tremendous shift in land ownership over a very, very short period of time. Now, what we're talking about here are hundreds of thousands of acres, and what is it that really these new owners wanted from this land? Basically, they wanted to make a profit by investing, their own capital and using this land that they had purchased in growing sugar. And once they made that decision, and they were doing this kind of thing from the mid-1830s. Missionaries were the first to get involved in growing sugar experimentally to see if it would generate a profit. Even on a small scale, it did generate a profit. Basically they got locked into that model from then on. Let's turn to the next slide. Anyone who was interested in investing in sugar and had, the cash to do it was confronted, however, with a kind of different sort of problem. Land was readily available, and part of the reason why land was readily available is that ali'i, once they claimed large portions of land, could find very little ways of actually using that land usefully. Mostly because the population of the Kanaka Maoli was plunging very quickly in the same period. Here's some numbers. In 1822, when the missionaries took a casual census, they counted something like 225,000 people. That was an estimation, but that's the number they counted. Now, that's 40 years after Lieutenant William King, aboard the Resolution, estimated the population of close to 500,000 people. So we think that minimally, between Cook's arrival and the missionaries' arrival, 40 years, we lost half the population, minimally. And it might have been much, much greater than that. Some people today basically believe that we had a population closer to 1 million than 500,000. But consider this. Lands that had been cultivated by Maka'ainana and working with chiefs over hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, lands were increasingly empty and open, and basically, what could a chief do? What could an ali'i do? He claims an entire ahupua'a, and there are only a few hundred people living in that land, whereas before there would have been thousands. They sold lands, they leased lands, they mortgaged lands to the Bishop Bank. However it happened, the land ownership shifted from them to corporations and individuals who were basically planting sugar. Just a few more minutes and I think I'll have the whole story for you. How many minutes? 5? Look, you don't just need land in order to grow sugar. You also need lots and lots of labor. And the more the industry grows, the more labor you need. You can see why Kanaka Maoli labor was not going to answer for this. You can see why if you wanted to grow more sugar every year, you were going to have to import people because the Kanaka Maoli people were disappearing. Every new disease that swept through the islands carried off hundreds or thousands or sometimes 10,000 people. So there was never any question that once they went down this path, at some point, they were going to have to import people. And let me just say this. 1846-47 is when you set up the Land Commission. 1850 is when you allow Haole to purchase land. In that same year, in that same legislature, they passed the Masters and Servants Act. And this allowed the kingdom as a country, as a nation state, to recruit labor from other countries. We all know what happened then, right? We recruited from China. It was a nation-to-nation kind of recruitment. It wasn't a bunch of companies going there and making separate deals with Chinese overseers. It was basically almost in the form of a nation-to-nation kind of agreement. So the kingdom essentially becomes an agent in all of this. The kingdom's government, which had been set up by Kaui Kiauli to administer to the Kanaka Maoli people, to regulate behavior and action and wealth and resources between the Maka'ainana and the Ali'i, within 10 years of its being formed, had become, in addition to, you know, a country for the Kanaka Maoli, had become an agent of sugar. And the Masters and Servants Act is emblematic of that. So when this begins, the overall recruitment of labor from China, it doesn't drastically change the demographics immediately, but over the long term, it will. More and more people will come from Asia to work on contracts, usually 5-year contracts, initially for $4 a month, for 10 hours a day, 5 days a week, half a day on Saturday. Next slide. And as they came, I mean, these were the kinds of situations that people found themselves in. The sugar companies, in fact, the Masters and Servants Act outlined in its contract that companies were supposed to provide housing and gardens and give access to medical care. In many cases, well, that was the housing. And in many cases, the gardens were too small to really support a family. There were many, many complaints, especially early on, from Chinese workers about the conditions here. But sugar took off. Next slide. Immigration grows through the 1860s and 1870s, and the sugar industry rises, especially during the Civil War, because the United States has a tariff on sugar. It protects its southern sugar growers with a heavy tax, 2 cents a pound. Anybody who wants to sell sugar in the United States from outside the U.S. has to pay this tariff to the U.S. government, which of course means that the U.S. producers have a price advantage. As during the Civil War years, when the South was being, when the North and South were fighting, the northern states bought almost as much sugar as could be produced in Hawaii because they weren't buying southern sugar. And, slowly but surely, again, the industry grew next. As the industry grew, more and more ships carrying sugar to the United States, a strong sort of trade and exchange taking place. But really the people who are profiting from this are really a handful of corporations. By the end of the Civil War, there were 12 strong plantations making money. There had been many other plantations which were quickly bought up by the larger ones. Next. In all of this, we want to be really clear that our chiefs and leadership actually saw much of this happening around them, and were trying to take steps to reassert, for instance, that the kingdom belonged to Kanaka Maoli people. After Kaui Kiauli died, Kamehameha IV and Kamehameha V were strong leaders for the people, but they never really tried to prevent the sugar industry from becoming more and more powerful and influential. Next slide. This is a picture of the Legislative Assembly meeting in the 1866 legislature. The kingdom itself had become a modern government. The legislature met biannually. They were voted into office biannually. The king ruled as by the 1860s really as a proper monarchy. He was the executive of the country. The Legislative Assembly consisted of Ali'i families and also sometimes wealthy men that were appointed by the king to represent the nobles, and the people elected their representatives from a number of districts in the Hawaiian Islands. Next. But what was more telling to the period was the rise of a very powerful business class. These were the companies that had been around since 1850. Castle and Cook, both missionaries, who had combined their assets together in 1850 and formed this corporation, which is today a very wealthy multinational corporation. William Alexander and Henry Baldwin, who combined their assets together and formed Alexander and Baldwin. C. Brewer, Charles Brewer was a chandler. He supplied whaling ships back in the 1830s and 1840s. American Factors, which was once a German company known as, I can't remember, and a British company known as Theo Davies. These were sugar factors. They didn't only run sugar plantations, they supplied plantations with machinery. They recruited and shipped labor. They did lots and lots of things, and they became more and more powerful and entrenched in the business, the very business and economy of Hawaii. Next. Here's what I wanted you to see. I want you to see this graph which charts the rise of revenues and debt in the kingdom beginning in 1846 and then every 10 years up to 1886 to 1888. And you're going to see a rise in revenues from, I think, $48,000, $46,000 were our revenues in 1846. We had a budget of $48,000, so we overspent by $2,000. And we got lots and lots of criticism from the missionary families about spending more than we had. But you're going to notice that that debt doesn't go away and it continues to rise over time. You can see that there's a slow but steady growth of government revenue. So this is money that the government is collecting through taxes. This is revenues that the government is collecting through duties and other kinds of things. And that rises to just over $1 million by 1876. And then look at what happens there. You see that rise, that abrupt rise to close to $5 million over the next 10 years. That's the result of a treaty that was pursued by Kalakaua in 1874 called reciprocity. Not only did the government revenues rise there, but so did the government debt, rising to over $1 million by 1886. Next slide. Reciprocity. What was this? And this is really the last thing I have to talk about. Sugar companies in the 1850s and 1860s made money. The growth was slow. Sometimes it was scary because, you know, with the end of the Civil War, the United States scaled back its demand for sugar. And some of the sugar companies, you know, they hated the uncertainty of that. And so really, as early as the 1850s, they were pressing a different mo'i, Genai Keliikuli, Kamehameha IV, Kamehameha V, and asking the mo'i to try and negotiate a treaty of reciprocity with the United States. And reciprocity means exactly what you think it does. You do for me, I do for you. And what they were saying was, they wanted this reciprocity treaty to basically have the United States eliminate the tariff against Hawaii sugar producers. In other words, treat Hawaii sugar producers as though they were, you know, an Alabama sugar producer or a Georgia sugar producer, as though they were part of the United States, right? So you could see that if the U.S. did this, it would be a tremendous favor, right, to the sugar companies. They would have an almost unlimited market. The United States continues to grow, its appetite for sugar continues to grow, and Hawaii could, these sugar growers, Alexander and Baldwin, Castleman Cook, C. Brewer, they would all profit tremendously from this. Reciprocity, though, means there has to be something in return. If you're asking the United States basically to, excuse my French, piss off all of the southern sugar growers and their senators, right, and their representatives in Congress by passing a law like this, then Hawaii has to give the United States something really, really huge. And it's not going to work, you know, for us to say, look, you get rid of your tariff against sugar and you can introduce all of your products to Hawaii duty-free. Because Hawaii is such a small market, it means almost nothing to the U.S. So what could the U.S. possibly want in exchange for reciprocity? Can I hear it loud and clear? Pearl Harbor, absolutely. That was on the table. That was on the table from 1873 when William Charles Lunalilo the King was negotiating a reciprocity treaty with the United States, and Kalakaua took it off the table because he said, I would never stand for it. There can be no cession. There can be no relinquishing of our land to another country without compromising our sovereignty. So initially, there was no exchange of Pearl Harbor. But once reciprocity takes over in Hawaii, what happens, and I want you to see the effects of reciprocity. This is a graph that demonstrates the tremendous rise in acres under production in sugar between 1870, the years before reciprocity, and 1890. So reciprocity went into effect in 1877, just so you know. And you can see that there's actually a 1,000% rise in acres under sugar in that 20-year period. You know, from, I think it was, I don't have those figures in front of me, but you'll just have to look at the graph. It goes up to about 81 or 82,000 acres from what was really less than 8,000 acres prior to the institution of reciprocity. Next slide. Here's the one you also want to see, is the rise in revenues for sugar companies. And it goes from about $1.4 million. That's the revenues generated to all of the sugar companies in 1870 to more than $14 million by 1890. Again, a 1,000% increase in revenues. Here's the thing, folks. If you go from being a company that's worth, let's just say there was just one company, $1.4 million in 1870, right? If you go from a company that's worth $1.4 million and you know, you're bringing in so much labor, you've bought so much acreage of sugar, of lands, what happens when you now are cultivating more than 10 times that amount of land with 10 times that labor, most of which came from overseas and are on contracts that you are bound to? Can you go back to the pre-reciprocity days? No, you cannot. You would lose your shorts. They weren't going to go back. And so they were quite upset with the king. And I'm going to finish the story here. But hear me. A lot of people criticize Kalakaua, and there's many things to criticize. But here's the point. Kalakaua would not renew the reciprocity treaty for Pearl Harbor. He would not do this. So what they did was they crippled Kalakaua. And in 1887, as most of you know, they entered with troops on the street and a small cartel of attorneys presenting a new constitution to the king, constitution which basically destroyed his power as an executive, which handed over half the legislature to people who had money, and put the power in the hands of the merchant class. These are the reasons for the overthrow and the annexation. Without Bayonet, none of the other things would have happened. The Queen's decision to overturn Bayonet and bring about a new constitution is what brought U.S. arms and the Committee of Public Safety against her. The story is not just economic, but it's an important story to know. It's important because we continue to face the same corporations, the same inequality of revenues, of earnings and land. It's still true in Hawaii. And for us, as we reach for sovereignty, we need to be aware of this. Thank you very much.
Mahalo, Dr. Osorio, for that. So John has taken us from the time of the kingdom into the time of sugar, the sugar industry, and how it's impacted sovereignty. So if you're just joining us live here on Olelo, know that this is the Sovereignty Conversations brought to you by the Kapolei Neighborhood Board. It will be shown every third Tuesday. This is one of 12 that will go on. And tonight we're featuring the topics that take us back first to a look in history to get us up to the point at which we can discuss the future of Hawaii and our nations. Now I'd like to bring back Poka Laenui to bring us up to the time of the Republic.
Aloha again. Cannot in 10 minutes. But John, I want to thank you very much. Thank you very much for that background history. So you remember land, labor, market. A lot of lands as a result of the mahele and as a result of these changes. Labor, cheap labor. A lot of Chinese, Japanese. In fact, Kalakaua, the first head of state ever to circumnavigate the world, the first head of state to address the United States Congress. When he went around the world to look for laborers, he went to Portugal. Now, Kalakaua, if we can get somewhat into his character, marvelous man. He was a genius. He spoke 9 languages. When he went to Portugal, the Portuguese didn't know what to expect out of this heathen, savage king of a place known as Hawaii. So they have cartoons in their newspaper of this more African individual with a bone in his nose stirring a pot, the pot, inside of the pot containing all Portuguese laborers. They had no idea who Kalakaua was. When he arrived in Portugal, he stepped off of the ship in the finest raiments of Western clothing at the time. And when he spoke in Portuguese. He greeted them, he fascinated the crowd. Over a period of time, he asked to have an audience with the king and queen of Portugal. Now what could this savage king, who now somehow learns Portuguese, can entertain the crowd in Portugal? So he brings with him that instrument that they call the baringas, the Hawaiians call the ukulele. And he fascinates the audience in a way that they have never heard their traditional music played by the so-called savage king. Throughout Europe, whether it was in England or wherever he went, even in Japan, where he received the Order of the Chrysanthemum, the highest order in Japan, he fascinated the world because of his ability to speak and the way he carried himself, and the fact that he had such a widespread knowledge of what was happening in the world, and yet he was the head of state of the most isolated group of lands in all of the world. What was his secret? If you went to the Bishop Museum, you would see drawings that he had of submarines. And if you hear the story, I think it was Alexander Graham Bell, who was such an obnoxious person that he would not waste time talking to others who did not or was not able to talk about his inventions and about modernity. And yet, when he met Kalakaua, they went, secreted themselves in a separate room, and they spoke for an hour. Kalakaua, fascinating individual. But he was also very strong-minded, and he had one foot in his culture and one foot in modernity. In his culture, he would go out and bring from the outer islands the kahuna. And he would have hula dance in the, at Iolani Palace. And the kahunas would begin their chant, and they would unroll a ball of string with knots tied to it. And each knot told them the story as they chanted. This was a traditional behavior. He brought about many of the traditions, recognizing essentially the same thing that, now I've forgotten his name, another kupuna who had come from England, who was the Prime Minister of Great Britain. Churchill, Winston Churchill, thank you, Leon, who told Te Rangi Hiro, a Maori chief, who is also known as Sir Peter Buck, the further back you can go into your history, the further forward you can look into your future. Well, Kalakaua, one foot in culture, the other foot in technology, so that Iolani Palace was constructed with telephone and electricity built in the palace before even the White House. If you look at the palace itself and the stairs going up to the palace, you see small holes underneath the stairs, because he would have guns sticking out, recognizing that people may try to take over. He was a very advanced person. He was also strong-willed, that you would not negotiate the sovereignty of Hawaii. So as John had spoken of earlier, he resisted giving away any aspect of Hawaiian land or Hawaiian sovereignty. They wanted to have sovereignty over Pearl Harbor, not just ownership of the land. Kalakaua stepped in and he says, no, what I will do is I will give you a treaty for temporary use for 10 years, exclusive use to the United States as a coaling and refueling station of Pearl Harbor. But they were saying, you know, reciprocity treaties come and go. Over a period of time, new king, what are we going to do? We're going to go through the same battle? So what they had to do was change the Constitution of Hawaii. How do you break down the popularity of a king of Hawaii, very well loved by the Hawaiian people, and how do you destroy his reputation? So the papers would print out these things about Kalakaua is a heathen. Kalakaua, he's trying to bring back the old religion. Kalakaua, look at what he's doing at Iolani Palace. He's calling all of the Hawaiians back. He's even having the hula dance at Iolani Palace. The Hawaiian people continue to support Kalakaua. They couldn't get rid of him. So what they did, the missionary party, they went out and they sent out a contract in California to send a hitman into Hawaii to kill a king. When the guy came into Hawaii, he discovered what the whole thing was about, and he wasn't set up to kill a king. He refused to carry out the contract. So how do you get rid of the king? This missionary party selected 5 among them, and they said, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to pull straws. The person who pulls the shortest straw has to kill a king. They pulled straws. The guy who got the shortest straw was so horrified that he had the shortest straw. He refused to carry out the deed. So what are you going to do? Well, it's that old story of gang. Gang up against a guy. So what they did, they went home, they got all their rifles, and they went before the king and they said, we will kill you unless you sign a new constitution which transfers power from the people, from the king, over to the missionary party. And if you read it, and I'm sorry, we don't have enough time to go through those details, but it was at the point of the bayonet that a new constitution was signed in 1887, and that's why you call it the Bayonet Constitution. The people were upset. Kalakaua fell into depression. When he fell into depression, he got sick. He went to San Francisco to recuperate. And in San Francisco, they say that the night that he was, one night he was enjoying himself, he was partying. The next morning, he died. Before he died, he had the people bring to him the most modern invention of the time. What was that? The phonograph. And he left his last words on the phonograph, where his wife, after she heard it, after it was brought back, listened to it over and over and over again. The phonograph and what is that? The road, I forget what you call it. It's still at Bishop Museum, okay? But it's very difficult to understand what the words are anymore. Some people say that he died not because of any health reasons. Well, it wasn't a health reason. They poisoned him. And how was he poisoned? They say they ground glass into his drink. So that even though they called whoever they could to try to revive him, they could not, because the glass just cut up the internal tube. So he dies, and now Liliuokalani takes over. And unfortunately, the time is up, and we won't go into the story of, oh, we should 5 more minutes? Okay, we'll continue for 5 more minutes. So Liliuokalani takes over. As soon as she takes office, she receives a petition by 2/3 of the voters in Hawaii, begging her change the constitution, restore the powers of government back to the people of Hawaii. So she begins to draft this constitution, and finally in 1891, she proposes a constitution. She has to go through first her cabinet members, most of them controlled by the missionary party because of restructuring of the new constitution. So they go through that. They don't support her. So at the end of the legislative session, she withdraws the constitution and she says, "I'll wait for another day." In the meantime, I'm going to change the story, and we're going to talk about the American side. You've heard about why in Hawaii, mostly American businessmen, but they also consisted of Germans and others, formed themselves. First they called themselves a missionary party. Why missionary party? They weren't missionaries, they were sons and daughters of missionaries, such as Sanford Dole of the first company, such as Thurston of the second company, I believe, of missionaries. They formed themselves into the missionary party, and now they teamed up with a person by the name of John Stevens. Stevens is the American minister plenipotentiary to Hawaii. What is plenipotentiary? It's all-powerful minister in Hawaii who governs over all U.S. military forces. Stevens had been from a place called Kennebec, Maine. He writes for the Kennebec Journal about 10 years before that. And he starts talking about why we should expand into the Pacific, and there is a golden pear ready to be plucked. And he talks about the United States have to take over Hawaii. He, along with another associate, Blaine, who becomes Secretary of State, begins to write these journals. And then Blaine, as Secretary of State, sends Stevens to Uruguay. Now he's in Uruguay. What does Uruguay have to do with Hawaii? He decides that they will intervene in the internal affairs of Uruguay under the guise of protecting American lives and property. So he lands American troops in Uruguay. The Uruguayan government gets all upset and they kick him out of Uruguay. So they send him off to Sweden and Norway. And after Sweden and Norway, they send him to Hawaii. So when the missionary party goes to Stevens and say, land the American troops, he says, under what guise can I land the American troops? Land them under the guise of protecting American lives and property. So you see a repetition of what had happened in Uruguay. So he says, okay, he lands 162 Blue Jackets, U.S. Marines. Gatling gun, the howitzer cannon on the USS Boston. It's interesting, Hawaii's history and how we connect up to the Boston. Because it was out of Boston that American Commission of Foreign Missions, ABCFM it's called, the missionaries start coming here out of Boston. And I don't mean to overrun my time. Okay, I'll keep talking. So what happens is, the Americans land the U.S. military on the 16th of January, 1893, under the guise of protecting American lives and property. On the 17th of January, 1893, these handful of individuals who call themselves a Committee for Public Safety, they switched their name from the Missionary Party to Committee of Public Safety. They began a walk in Honolulu. You're all familiar with Honolulu. You got King Street, you got Queen Street. In between, separating King and Queen Street, starting from, let's say, 4th Street, is Merchant Street. It was at that time a smaller lane. Okay? So they began from the law office of William Smith on 4th Street, and they began walking down to Ali'olani Hale. What is Ali'olani Hale? The building right behind Kamehameha statue. It was a government building. So they begin their march in back of the main street so that they don't attract attention. Why you don't attract attention? Because they know the Americans had landed. They billeted right on the corner of Merchant Street and Ali'olani Hale. It was called the Opera House at that time. If you are there to protect American lives and property, how the heck do you stay in this building? Well, the next day when they started the march from Merchant Street, from 4th Street and Merchant, and marched down to this building, and then they began, when they arrived at the back of Ali'olani Hale, they began to read a proclamation. A guy by the name of Cooper, been in Hawaii for less than a year, according to Lili Palani. He begins to read a proclamation that we hereby declare ourselves the government of the Hawaiian nation. We call ourselves a provisional government. Provisional until we can develop a treaty and submit Hawaii to the United States. In the meantime, as he's reading this, 18 of them declaring themselves a government, from across the street, the Americans begin to walk across the street, encircle them, and recognize them as now the official government of Hawaii. Liliuokalani is saying, how can you do that? First of all, there is no reason for the landing of the American troops. How can you do that? Minister Stevens says, I have recognized this government, I will protect and defend them. They appoint Sanford Dole as their president, and immediately Dole says to Liliuokalani, sends a message to Liliuokalani, surrender or face the wrath of the United States government. I've been signaled, and I see Brother Kioni over there. So I'll stop here. Now, next time when we talk, we need to follow exactly what happened, how the Hawaiians responded, and we'll talk about President Harrison, President Cleveland, and all of the other cheating that went on during this period of time. Okay?
Again for Poka Laenui. Amazing job. Jon took us from center. He took us all the way up to the overgrowth. Yeah, that's an amazing amount of information in such a short period of time. What we're going to do now, our live audience is going to watch some very informational commercials at this time while we change our stage up here. And we're going to bring on our respondents. So the two of you will come up and join Kioni on this end. So again, mahalo everyone for joining us. For you who have walked in late tonight and didn't hear this earlier, this is a forum, a series 1 of 12, featured every third Tuesday of the month right here in Kapolei High School, and it's brought to you, I needed to make this clarification, I'm sorry I didn't mention it earlier, by the Hawaiian Affairs Committee of the Makakilo, Kapolei, and Honokai Hale Neighborhood Board, and Kalamai for those other two communities that I left out here. And it is this Hawaiian Affairs Committee that has organized this series and will be moving forward. There will be, coming up shortly in the next few weeks, a Facebook page and a website set up so that you can follow along on this series and any of the documentation that comes out of here and any information that they are going to create for the public. You can refer there. We don't have that information right now, but I will be giving you Kioni Dudley's email address at the end, and you can direct any of your questions to him. Also, while these commercials are going on and we get set up here, we're going to have two people walk around. Doris and Anna, I believe, will be walking around and passing around note cards along with pens so that we can take questions and comments and address them to the panelists. These three, including Palani, Jon, and Poka, will come back at the end for the last hour, and we'll entertain those questions and those comments. So we would like for you to, if you have one, just flag down Doris and Anna, and they'll be able to pass out a card to you. so you can get your mana'o down. Now, when you're writing your questions, please be cognizant that I will be the one that's reading them, and I will read them as they come up to me, as they're in the stack that comes up to me. And we will try to get through as many questions as we can in that short amount of time. And those that we don't address here, we'll pass it on to Kioni, and he'll have, he will be able to facilitate those throughout this series and make sure that everybody's understanding of them can come through. Yes?
Yes, can we have an open mic instead of written questions instead?
Tonight is not going to be an open mic night, but we will.
I think it's important. I think it's important locally and community-wise. I think it's important because the control. We have witnessed these questions on paper before, and we think it's a control meeting. So we don't want to have that perspective like, you know, this is a control meeting. Yeah. I think all the people over here are community people that are interested in my expression, how I ask the questions, and the response to me. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for your mana'o, and we'll share that with the organizers of this event. So thank you. Talk yet, or two people that you have not heard talk yet. And of course, OHA Trustee from the island of Oahu, Trustee Apo, and also UH Keliikuli from Leeward, who is an instructor at Leeward Community College, soon to be professor. Yeah. If we all do our job right, we will kako'o the next generation of leadership up here, and they'll be joined by Kioni will become a panelist in this section also, and they will be responding. They'll be responding to the history that was told earlier for a bit, and then we'll go into featuring our other guest tonight that has arrived, Mr. Palani Vaughan and his musicians. So that's what's gonna come up for this next hour and a half. Again, we have all the way until 9, I believe. We'll be live up until 8:30. And then we'll take that last amount of time to entertain those questions from the audience. Yeah. How are we doing, Olelo staff? On time? Are we still into the commercials? Again, it's very rare to have these conversations live, so we mahalo the Olelo staff. Okay. So I've been informed that we are back. We are back live. So from the two people that we have not heard from, Pehea ko olua mana'o. What is your mana'o about what has been presented thus far tonight, Trustee Apo?
Yeah, you know, time is short. We're going to run out of time, so I'm going to try to be efficient. Let me preface my. I guess I'm going to pose a question. I don't know how many are familiar with the story of Rashomon. It's a Japanese story. There is this forest with a clearing in the middle. And 3 travelers, not knowing each other, happen upon this clearing in different parts of the forest. And the 3 of them witness a rape, guy raping a woman. Fast forward. Both the victim and the perpetrator of the crime are recovered. A trial ensues, and the 3 people are brought up as witnesses, and each one tells a different story. They all saw the same thing, different story. Hawaiian history is kind of like that. It depends on who you talk to as to what the story is. And one of the things that I'm finding that we're learning as trustees is history is critical. Who tells the story is critical to any effort to seek reconciliation, either with the United States or all the other models going to the United Nations. Who tells the story, and which story will carry weight and present the case. Now, I know there are people out in the viewing audience who have heard 2 great versions, or at least a connected version of the story, and both from people who have very high cultural standing within the community and in the work, life's work that they've committed. But I wanted to ask you, for people who don't know much about Hawaiian history, what would you recommend they do in terms of going out and being exposed to the various versions of the Hawaiian history?
Yeah, I would suggest, and this is the same thing I asked myself, 1976, when I represented a particular defendant on the question of jurisdiction of the United States. What I did was I began with the address of the President of the United States to the Congress. Okay? When Cleveland addressed the Congress and he laid out the events that occurred and why these events occurred, when he sent Minister Blunt to Hawaii. So that was in 1893, December 1893. And then 100 years after that, 1993, December 18, 1993, where you have, excuse me, the apology resolution. Oftentimes I call it a confession. Established by the United States Congress itself twice. Well, twice by the presidents of the United States. So yes, we all have different versions. I read Lilio Kalani's story, I know about the Blunt report, I know about this, and that, and you're absolutely right. So how do you come down to a singular story, and when you're dealing with nation to nation, I suggest that we settle with what we call a perpetrator, and what is their story. So you take it from the worst possible position, and you say, okay, accepting everything that you say, we have established a case by your words. So that is the recommendation that I would make.
Mahalo, Poka. Dr. Osorio?
I was going to ask you to say something about this too. You know, I could tell you to read things that have been written by Kanaka Maoli in the last, 20 some odd years. The Kalakame Lehiwa's book on the Mahere, my book on the 1887 Bayonet Constitution. Knowing by Silva's Aloha Betrayed, in which but you know what all of these things sort of have in common is they look at the stories that were told by people who lived in this time, by Kanaka. And one of the things that happened when you tell the story of Rashomon, one of the things that happens is that Kanaka would never have been in that court. They would not have been allowed to speak or to tell their story. They were completely silenced in 1890, as they were silenced as they could be in 1893 and afterwards. So my response to this is, there are many stories about the overthrow. The facts, I think, are just exactly as Poka says they are. What the United States admits to is damning enough. But we are also, I think, obligated to know how our people felt about this country. And you should read it in their own words. Aloha Betrayed is a great place to start.
Mahalo. And Hui, as you get your question together or your response to the questions posed, the references that they were talking about were one, the Blunt report. Again, James Blunt wrote a report, and you can look that up. It's on the web. Also, the books that Professor Osorio was talking about was Native Lands and Foreign Desires by Kamele Hiba, and also Dismembering Lahui, which is Professor Osorio's book. So those are some places that they're recommending to start. Hui? Aloha. Aloha.
I'm actually really impressed when you guys were able to condense that information into 45 minutes. That takes me 2 weeks of class time to cover completely. So mahalo for that. One thing I think is important about attending these kinds of conversations and actually having conversations within our own communities is the fact that we're discussing our own histories. When the movie, which was supposed to be entitled Barbarian Princess, but then was retitled the Princess Keliikuli movie, was released, I went to a couple of the initial viewings. And you have a lot of Hawaiians mahaloing these outsiders for telling us our history, which I think in many ways misrepresented the events of the 1800s. Yeah, a lot of the events that they just covered in 10 minutes. Yeah, and so I think these conversations are important not just for the younger ones in college. This is not about academia. This is about knowing our histories. This is about identifying our kuleana, which is to read the reports and the records left behind by our kupuna, and understanding, you know, the emotions that they're experiencing during these events, understanding that they are making the best choices they possibly can at that time, and then putting it into perspective when we're talking about sovereignty. Yeah, so, I mean, in latter sessions that will occur here and elsewhere, I hope, I think we need to be prepared to speak from our na'au, but also have that guided by the records that our ancestors left behind. Yeah.
Mahalo. Poka has another comment to make. Then we'll go to Kioni and then Palani.
I cannot let this pass. I think one voice that we really need to hear from is Palani. And just by coincidence, I have at least one paragraph in her book. If you have the chance to, go take a look at Hawaii's Story by Hawaii's Queen. She says, "Oh, honest Americans, as Christians, hear me for my downtrodden people. Their form of government is as dear to them as yours is precious to you. Quite as warmly as you love your country, so they love theirs. Do not covet the little vineyards of neighbors, so far from your shores, lest the punishment of Ahab fall upon you, if not in your day, in that of your children. For be not deceived, God is not mocked. The people to whom your fathers told of the living God, and taught to call Father, and whom the sons now seek to despoil and destroy, are crying aloud to him in their time of trouble, and he will keep his promise, and he will listen to the voices of his Hawaiian children lamenting for their homes."
Next month it will be more organized. This goes on now for 12 months, every third Tuesday night, and it'll be right here, and it'll be live on channel 54 or 53. The next thing we're going to do then is move to Palani Vaughan and the King's Own, and Palani has a story to tell. And we're just going to, during his presentation, fade out with the television, and then we'll continue on for another hour. So Palani, do your thing.
Down another path and hit detours, and I apologize to everybody. It's not Wai'anae, I'm more used to Wai'anae. Wai'anae, it's like Makiko over there. You know, I've been listening, and Hayden Burgess speaks about reading the Queen's Story, Hawaii's Story by Hawaii's Queen. He was in the Army just as I was during the Vietnam time. I was part of the Hawaii Army National Guard. I was in the 47th Artillery. And when we got called up, and I had just recorded Meet Palani Vaughan in the Sunday Manoa, so it got released when I was in my second week at Schofield, saluting and playing a soldier. But you know, that speaks to the point that I feel that because we were illegally, unlawfully taken, and please understand that King Kalakaua, and not just King Kalakaua, but all of the monarchs that preceded him, were very concerned about the demise of our Hawaiian people, our Hawaiian blood. So much so that the prediction was that by 1897, we would be extinct as a race. He came to the throne having been elected by the House of Nobles in 1874, February 12th. The first thing he said and spoke was, "I proclaim Ho'olulahui, increase the nation, build up our Hawaiian blood." And so if you look back and do genealogy, if you know how to get your family names and go back to that period of time from 1874 forward, you will find families like I did, you know, 20 children in a family. I don't know how they did it, but they did it. And our king was playing the odds. There was the fact that Hawaiian children could die, you know, in childbirth or in youth, or diseases were everywhere. So by playing the numbers, he was hoping to build our numbers up, and thank God he did, because when he came to the throne, there were 43,000 of our pure-blooded, Kanaka Maui, and Hapa. 43,000 wouldn't sell out Aloha Stadium, to give you a perspective. And though he was on the throne until 1891, when his sister became the queen, the monarch, there were then 39,000 of our pure folks. So a very important and significant time. So when I talk about going to war on behalf of America's wars, dragged into them, and I speak because I speak as a veteran, not a volunteer, but a veteran nonetheless. But I think about why in the world would America, and that was the time of the draft. Remember, it was a draft, we had no choice. You hit age 17, you have to register with selective service. By 18, you need to decide which branch of the service you're going into. I chose Hawaii National Guard. And we got activated anyway for almost 2 years. But it was a good time because for me, it helped me. I spent a lot of time on Hawaii Island, Moku'ukeawe, up in the Pohakula training area, because we were an artillery unit. I was what they call an artillery surveyor. We spent a lot of time out in the pu'us with the rams, the sheep, with the goats, the cow, with the pigs. In fact, you sleep out in the fields, you wake up, there's a baby pig in your sleeping bag, you know. It was a wonderful time because I just enjoyed that, and I got to know our Hawaii Island very, very well, and the people there. Anyway, let me talk about Hawaii's story by Hawaii's Queen. I came out of the service and went directly back into music, playing with wonderful old-time musicians like Ray Keeney. During the period just before Ere Kamaya was involved in my life, and we were playing music together. And then we started to engage our music out in Waikiki, eventually taking us to what was then called the Maluna Lounge in the Kuhio Hotel in Waikiki, up was the penthouse. And it was the Sons of Hawaii, Gabi Pahinui, Ere Kamae, David Feet Rogers, Joe Marshall, myself, Moke Ale, and I would get up and sing. What I loved to sing were the songs composed by Queen Kalani. And so songs like anyway, did all of that, and then this Canadian couple, these Maori people from Canada, invited me to sit at their table, and he said, you know, we noticed you like to sing the Queen's song. I said, oh yeah, she's a beautiful songwriter. And then he said, do you know much about our Queen? I said, I'm trying to learn. He said, do you know, have you read, do you know about the overthrow? And here I am, 50% Hawaiian, I knew nothing, and my face, if it could turn red, probably was, maybe purple. And I was looking at them, and I said, no, I don't. And they said, okay. The very next night, they came back to our showroom and called me down to sit with them during that break. And the husband handed me Hawaii's story by Hawaii's Queen. And he said, here, read about your Hawaii and the overthrow. So I feel very, very, Poka learned his story of the Queen through his perusing the library during your active duty time. And I'm so, our Queen was so smart in putting her thoughts down. And when I write music or record it, I try to do the same thing. In a small way, share knowledge that I've gleaned from newspapers or stories and what have you. One of the, before even that happened, there was a song that, I'm going to do this for you. The song I heard on the radio, Don Hope. And I'll tell you, Don Hope was a sovereignty activist. If you don't know it, he really was. And he mentored me as a singer, told me to go sing Hawaiian songs, find the Hawaiian musicians and he would record me. Unfortunately, that didn't happen, but I thank him for that mentorship. And then I heard a song that he had recorded, written by another Hawaiian who went by the actor's name of Lani Kai. He wrote, I believe, this was in perhaps 1966, 7, somewhere in that time frame. And I believe he was writing about his grandfather. He entitled the song Tutu Kane. Listen to the mission bells, ringing, ringing. Hear Hawaiian people singing, singing. He stands alone, watching his own his coconut hat now. Tutu Kane, just waving his coconut hat. He's watching his people, they're giving, giving, their hearts full of laughter and song. Someday he shall share with the grandchild who can keep on weaving his coconut hat now, just like Tutu Kane, weaving the coconut hat. Sing with us. Let me introduce Mr. Peter Apo Jr. Mr. Buddy Mama Kia. The face of his islands are changing, changing. The ways of his people are fading, fading. Oh, his race is a dying. The rain dew is crying. The rain dew cries. Weave your coconut hat to pass on your knowledge of Hawaii to your Ohuna. Sing with us. Come on, couple of sing with us. Not to take up, I know we're late, and so I apologize to everybody.
Take your time.
There's a song, there are a few sovereignty songs. I believe one thing. You know, the evidence is there. Blount report. Also, there's the apology bill. Why would America apologize if, in fact, they didn't do something wrong? They know they did something very wrong. Now, we have to be able to, you know, take them by the nose. No, I'm sorry, just take them by the hand, show them aloha and say, like our kupuna did. We show aloha, be very diplomatic, and then convince them, let's do the right thing. And I really believe we can do that. But I wrote this song. How long must Kunini Uokalani wait for 121 years of justice terminate? How much longer will America take to act upon its 1993 apology bill and return the kingdom of the right to our queen? Took from her very 7th of 1893 with illegal left blue jacket U.S. Marines. How long? How long? This song for many, many years. And the last time I sang it, Hoi Kupuna came up, Anake Eti, and she goes, oh, then she wanted, I take umbrage with the way you're singing this song. And I said, you know, what do you mean? You think I should do it with a more sedate, slow hula tempo? And she goes, yeah, yes, because that's how we learned it from Kumu, Uncle Henry Pa, Mo'ikeha Pa. You know, and I said, I respect that. But Uncle Henry was my friend. We performed together, we did many things together, so I knew him very, very well. And then I said, if you were talking about using historical notes, this song was composed for the Royal Hawaiian Band members who refused, objected, and defied the provisional government messenger who had said, you no longer are Royal Hawaiian Band, and you need to sign this promise that you will serve and honor the new government. Well, they rejected and walked away. They went down to Kapalama area, where the Kapalama stream is, and they sought out Ellen Pendergast, who was one of the ladies waiting for the queen. And in tears, they begged her to write a song. Anyway, we know the story of Kaulana Longtime. But on the first, as I was explaining to this Anake who came up to me, then I sang the song on January 17th. Every January 17th, I will do something to remember our, not just the Kupuna, but the struggles of our queen. And if there's no big event, we will go, certain people will join me, we will go to the Royal Mausoleum and stand before Kalaka with Kurt, Kaya, sing songs, and give them aloha, let them know we're still here, we still remember. Anyway, I explained to her that these, on the first anniversary, we were composing the song, and this was in 1893, several days after the overthrow itself. The former Royal Hawaiian Band members performed that song, singing it with defiance, doing hula, not in the sedate way, but with ku'i and with just every way proclaiming their defiance and rejection of the Hawaii government that had taken them over. So, going by that, I feel that we're okay to do Kalananatu, an up-tempo version.
Oh,
Anyway, hello everybody. Thank you. You're so kind.
Mahalo, Palani, and mahalo again, Peter Moon Jr. and Mr. Monaco. And mahalo. Now we're going to ask Palani to come and join our panel here. And the organizers of this event have decided, Mahalo Nui have decided to change the format of the community section and entertain questions at the mic, questions and comments at the mic. Now, please realize this is a community meeting. There are probably lots of people who have questions. We have probably a good 40 minutes left in this part of our forum. So we'd like to take as much questions and comments as possible. And know again, this is very important to know, this is just one of 12 opportunities over the next year that you will be able to engage the different panelists at different times. So if you'd like, and I'm sorry for those of you who did write questions on the front, if you could actually just come and move up to the front, and we will take you one at a time at this mic in the front here. While we're setting up the mics here, I'd just like to kind of impress upon our audience here that there is, the reason why we include Mele Laului, or songs of the nation, into this discussion of our history is, as a peoples who come from an oral tradition, our Mele, our songs, our chants are very significant in telling the story of the Kanaka Maoli from the Kanaka Maoli's perspective and point of view. Yeah, there is no translation that can substitute the perspective and the understanding that is expressed through mele, through chant, and through mo'olelo being told. And significant examples of that have been expressed tonight from our monarchy, from both Kalakaua, who many chants were composed for, and also he himself was a composer, and Lili Okalani, of course. And on our panel here tonight, we have 3 musicians that also are not just academics or intellectuals or people who have taken on the quest and the commitment to explaining and sharing our mo'olelo, but they also have done that in multiple ways, through writing articles, through writing books, and also to writing songs and chants that commemorate the history, the today, for our Lahui in the future. So mahalo nui for that, Palani, and we have our mic set up. Okay, good. So any of you who would like to ask a comment or has a comment or a question, please come to the front. One, if you can, please identify if you know who already you would like to answer their question. And if not, if you want to open it generally, then I'll help facilitate that on our panel. And they will be going back and forth and sharing their microphones.
Turn the microphone sideways.
Mahalo.
My name is Emcee, and my question is for Mr. Apo because he's with OHA. Basically, Mr. Apo, a lot of my family has been talking about the papers that have been coming out for Genai Keliikuli. And on top of those papers are a statement that says basically if you don't sign these papers by a certain date, there's a possibility that you might not be considered Hawaiian. And we view that as being a threat towards our families and towards our ohana and towards our friends. And most of our people that I know are talking about that. I even got memos from the University of Hawaii to my email at the University of Hawaii from certain professors that I'm not going to name that was promoting this idea. And I'm totally offended by that. Most of my aunties and everyone else is looking at that and saying, what in the world is going on with this OHA that they could dare do that? And I couldn't understand that in the sense that I'm a Kamehameha school student, you know, in the past. I went to Kamehameha schools. My father is a Hawaiian homestead. The genealogy and ruling chiefs, I can directly connect to all those chiefs. And you tell me, because I don't sign one paper, that I will be excluded from decisions in one Hawaiian kingdom because the U.S. government is telling me that, and you folks represent that? There's something really wrong with that idea. And the idea that I'm not saying you, but the idea that OHA can threaten our people with this type of divisive type of nature is kind of amazing, because this is the same policies that the United States has done in the past. The way I look at it, the way we all look at it, and then they're telling us we ought to trust them with the idea that we're signing a paper that could mean the consensus of our people. Finally conceding, we're giving consensus to them, saying that we're going to allow them and be under them as a kingdom or under as a sovereign nation, under a nation. That's a ridiculous idea when we have the right to full sovereignty, international sovereignty, a status of true sovereignty that's not even being really promoted by OHA or told to our people originally, and then they're demanding that we sign these papers. I find that really offensive, and I would like to know why you folks even allowed that. And like Kamanao is sitting over there too, he's director of this. Who is responsible for that? They should be fired for that. They should be fired and held accountable by the people for that. I mean, I cannot believe that they would do that, like what Indian nations have done to their own people, in not funding their own people, not allowing them to be part, because of greed, anunu, and pakeha. The very things that in that song that he's singing about, Kalemana Pua, you know, Aole Aekau, Ikapulima, Makapepo ka enemy, the very pepper of the enemy signing that, and this is in the spirit of how this paper has come to us. It's the same spirit that our kupuna protested a long time ago, and I protest today about that.
First of all,
hello. First of all, I profusely, on behalf of the trustees of the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, apologize for that tremendous error in judgment. Now let me backtrack a little bit. Genai Keliikuli is not a creature of OHA. It is a creature of the Hawaii State Legislature that crafted a piece of legislation, and OHA's role was simply to provide the necessary levels of funding in order for the Genai Keliikuli Commission to carry out its work. So, long story short, it was a very sort of contentious relationship throughout the campaign. And you know, everyone was well-meaning. We were all trying to go in the right direction. And contentious in that there were several flare-ups throughout the campaign because of mistakes and messaging. I think that was probably done without enough thoughtfulness. But the message that we hoped would have come across is simply, Genai Keliikuli was nothing more or less than a registration process to be able to take the first step trying to identify who would the citizens of a nation be if they were in election today. No more than that, no less than that. So the pilikia that truly has emerged out of that, I apologize on behalf of all the trustees of the Office of Hawaiian Affairs. It was never intended to be that message. And certainly, if you have, even if you don't have koko, you know, my motto is Hawaii loa puliki kako, all Hawaii stand together. And we hope that moving forward from this point, as Kanai Uluvala sunsets, that we are going to be inclusive. The message is Hawaii is for all Hawaiians, and that certainly no one is going to be disenfranchised. There's no intention to disenfranchise everyone. And I believe, I don't know if I'm speaking out of school or too early, I believe the registration process is probably in some form or another going to be reopened or continued. That's not a given, so that everyone will have an opportunity. And even those who choose not to participate because of whatever their reasons would be fine. It still doesn't disenfranchise them, whether you sign up for Kanai Olovala or not. You are still a Hawaiian and entitled to your viewpoint and entitled to participate.
Okay. Mr. Apo.
Aloha.
I'm just to give reverence to the kupuna who's sitting behind you who wants to ask a question too. Can you hold your next question until others have gone?
I just want to tell him, thank you very much. I know, Mr. Apo, that you're a good man, and so is Kamana'o, because a lot of my friends tell me so. So maybe you folks didn't make the decision, but I still feel you folks should go back and fire the people who put that on that pepo.
Maybe thank you for accommodating the community for an open mic. I don't know if it was fruitful or maybe engaging or what, but my name is Glenn O'Mill. I'm from Eva Beach, and I've been involved with the community on the grassroots as well as a puvalu level. I've been a Hawaiian activist. I've been with Poka on the Native Hawaiian Convention, but I've been engaged with the community on the grassroots local level. And I came here this evening with the understanding that on a local level, there would be changes made. Changes. In other words, we've been fighting development. In this Eva region, we're inundated with development. And there's nothing on the books. No government document, no government planning document that gives the Hawaiians a privilege of saying, consult them first before you do any kind of development. There's no cultural policy, no standards in any of these documents. Kioni know that. He went to Ho'opili. Ho'opili, throughout the whole testimony, there was never concern about Hawaiian culture, protection of Hawaiian assets. So I came with the understanding that there are going to be changes tonight. A cultural policy document that throughout the whole planning stage, that there would be some kind of a standard or a criteria that all the Hawaiians would agree on, that would tell government or developers, consult the Hawaiian before you engage in this construction or this development. There's none. And Kioni knows that. So the effort, I mean, we can see it now. The rampant development, the disregard for cultural assets, for the protection and preservation of those assets. From the mountain, the water that runs down to the ocean, our reefs are dying. Our reefs in Eva Beach are dying. Our watershed is being desecrated. Underneath, our burial grounds, underneath, is mirrored on top of the land. It's mirrored under the ground. Our estuaries under the ground, our burial sites under the ground. Hey, disregard. Here, money. Our benefactor, Hawaiian Homelands, DHHL, mum to the word. They don't give a rip. So we got to have some policies in place, some standards. The government would say, local as well as state government, that all these planning documents, there's six in this Eva Moku area alone, 6 documents, planning guides, no policies on Hawaiian preservation or protection.
That's right.
Would any of you on here are able to address his policy questions at this time? Poka?
I'll try to be very quick. Hello, Glenn. Good to see you. There's a number of different arenas that we can look at this policy. The state legislature just meeting, they oftentimes mouth the idea of the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People. That declaration also adopts the International Labour Organization Treaty on the Rights of Indigenous People. What it says is that anytime you touch indigenous people's assets, you have to consult with indigenous peoples. The United States recently adopted, not formally because it was just a declaration, it's not a treaty or a convention. But if you can push the legislature to move even beyond that, because they already said the Native Hawaiians are our indigenous people, let's push it one more time and say anytime you touch any of the resources, consultation is required. Okay. The city and county just adopted their, or going through their planning process, and they're asking what are the standards by which we plan, and that's where you're going to hit them as well. This group is just a loose conglomeration organized by that boy Holly over there. We got to start talking about Hawaiian sovereignty.
We're just a bunch of fast talkers.
But one more thing before you say that out loud. The third point, and you and I remember because we are officials of the Native Hawaiian Convention. When we came out with the independence model, we said, and within that independence model, we have a particular kuleana only for the Po'e Hawaii, the Kumu Hawaii, right? And that was where we preserved the rights of the Native Hawaiians to educate the kids, to preserve their resources, all that other stuff that you and I went out publicly, and we're very familiar with what the rights are. But these are the statements that are contained in there, and I agree totally with you. Consultation of indigenous people is absolutely necessary when you're possessing indigenous people's lands.
Just a short comment on that. You know, the government is moving so fast. You can see 3,600 acres Kalailoa. And we went through a governmental process, the consultant party, where the government consults the community to see if there's any archaeological or cultural preservation that needs to be protected. They fast-track that. Today, everything in Kalailoa, 3,600 acres. Hawaiians don't have a chance in there. They don't have rights of protection or preservation of trails, of underground resources. We don't have that. We don't have it. So it's an immediate thing. I know. Even in my neighborhood board, you know, that's the reason why I put so much credence in Kioni, because their neighborhood board can do something. They can affect change immediately on a county level. So maybe this is not the right venue to talk about sovereignty. Maybe the immediate issues would be more accommodating at this time and place. Thank you.
Mahalo for that. John, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I'm afraid that what this group of people is talking about is nation building, and what you're concerned about is keeping communities alive. And it's happening everywhere. I went to a meeting last week out in Haula, people from Laie and from Kahuku who are really, really worried about the new development that's being promoted by the Mormon Church, how difficult it is for them to stop it. These things have been happening on Oahu now for many, many, many years. Most of us grew up like this, fighting that kind of urbanization. And that kind of fight, I mean, it wouldn't matter, in my opinion. It doesn't matter if you have a sovereign Hawaiian government, state of Hawaii, U.S. government. There's always money talking, and if you want to protect communities, you have to organize. That's what we do. We organize, we try and protest, we show up at public hearings, we try and get the laws and the permissions and the variances changed. And that won't change, regardless of what governs Hawaii, because of how much people want to own land here. we will always have to organize. And I really, really appreciate what you have to say, because that's what, that's where my heart is, and that's where the heart of so many people I work with is.
Kioni, before we take the next question, I'm sorry.
Just very briefly, Glenn, I really see this movement as building, as a catalyst that might affect all of that. As people tell their friends, and then as we get more and more people involved in this month after month after month, by the time that we get to the 9th, 10th, 11th months, we'll be talking about the new government and what the new government's going to be like. That's when we begin to really talk about the loss of water, the loss of land, the loss of farmland, the loss of this, the loss of that, and put those things into what we're talking about a new government. By that time, if we have people really watching what's going on in sovereignty, we'll be able to really affect things, and then we'll hopefully move to a new nation and be able to do something about it, really.
Mahalo. Okay, our next question.
Hi, my name is Celeste LaQuesta. I'm a resident of Ever Beach, currently a former neighborhood board chair. I understand where Glenn's coming from, and so does Kioni. I mean, we all battled on how to save our culture sites, our historic culture sites, like EVs that was found all in Ever Beach, and there is so much EVs that you guys would never ever believe. How it was destroyed, how it was never cleaned, and it's sad to say that some of the houses are living under those EVs. But I gotta say, how would you guys tolerate the fact that having all these elected officials step on the Hawaiian people when we come to voice? Now let me tell you something. I worked in the city council office. I was there doing a lot of testimonies, a lot. I come downstairs and I go back up to my office, I cry. Because voices are never heard, especially from the Hawaiian people. Voices are never heard. And I'm up in my office and I gotta watch that television and listen to that and then vote against the people. Kioni, you were there. You were there. I have a granddaughter that was born to speak Hawaiian. Kioni, you were there when she did the Oli. And she was just elementary school. Now, I gotta say something that we need to reunite, we need to all stand together. We need to stand together strong. I went to OHA meeting with him and with Glenn, and what I found in the OHA meeting was everybody like me, the royal family. You know what? We are the royal family. We are the ohana of the royal family. There's no royalty. The only royalty is God. So what are you guys going to do for the people when we come to become a kingdom? We cannot let these elected officials that we have now, which this particular group is run by them, tell you guys what to do.
Okay, anyone on our panel like to address your question? Again, it's a difficult one. What we have up here is not necessarily policymakers or at that point in the discussion yet where the next day after governance is formed, but anyone else that you'd like to share?
Let me take a shot.
Okay, Trustee Paul.
Hawaii is like a movie, and the script is being written somewhere else. We import 90% of our food, 90% of our energy. Most of the major, huge projects that result in jobs, development projects particularly, are initialized in boardrooms thousands of miles away. Okay? So that's the first thing we need to understand, is that we are smack dab in the middle of a major globalization of the world. At this point, we are not equipped to deal with it in the way that I think, as you expressed, we would like to. We don't have the kinds of policies in place. Now, let me fast forward. There is kind of a Hawaiian model, that was here from pre-contact time. And what the Hawaiian model does, if you picture a triangle, it takes whatever the activity is, the community in which it takes place, and the people who live there. And your measures of success must address all 3 points of the triangle so that there is balance. Ho'okaulike, balance. Now here's how this plays out. Conservationists, as we know them today, that kind of come out of the West, will take huge landscapes and in the name of preservation not allow anything to happen. Generally, in the Hawaiian model, this triangle I'm talking about, they would rather see a mountain planted in lo'i than just left to lie fallow to look at. So that's the difference. We are, in fact, as a people, I think, very growth-oriented, but we kind of forgot all those basic principles of sustainability that only now are beginning to reemerge with different names. So I really believe that if Hawaiians are given more of a shot at running things and at being in positions of higher responsibility, that you are going to see a shift in thinking and a way to move forward with sustainable growth that's based in Hawaiian values of how to manage resources.
Mahalo Trustee Poka.
Mahalo, Peter. I don't mean to belabor the point. Peter takes a very broad perspective, and it's all true, the stuff that is hitting us, and at times it's beyond our control. And yet there are certain things that are within our control, and that's what I call the deep culture of Hawaii. And it's in each of our hands to start making a change. Today, Hawaii operates under a deep culture in which our formal systems are all controlled by 3 fundamental pillars: domination, individualism, and exclusion. You can call it the DIE, deep culture. That's the way we operate when we're in court. That's the way you operate the education system when you start measuring who's smarter than the other one, and then you create grading systems and all that stuff. That's the way we operate economically. That's the way we govern our environment. Domination, individualism, and exclusion. DIE. And oftentimes we get caught up in that very culture. I, as an attorney, if I'm getting a case, I will jump into court and I'm totally DIE. But when we come back to our communities, the way neighbors get together, the way families get together, instead of domination, it's olo. The way we conduct this discussion, olo. Instead of individualism, it's lokai. Think about the general good for everybody instead of only yourself. In terms of exclusion, we always say aloha. Include with a sense of loving, caring, and all that. Whether it's economic policies, or how we treat the environment, or how we educate our children, it should be under olo, lokahi, and aloha. Ola. It has to be under that kind of deep culture. And only until we shift the deep culture in our communities, in our families, and start pushing it from the bottom up, so that we start paying more respect to one another, more respect to our environment, only then are we going to make that shift. If we don't make the shift, then you can talk about any governmental form. But if the deep culture stays in DIE, then all you're doing is separating, you're controlling, and you're running the same rat race. So that we all end up winners of the rat race, but we all turn into rats. And is that the objective of what we're talking about? Hawaiian sovereignty is something more important than that. It's about pono. That started out with Paea Kamehameha, and it continues all the way up to this very day. Pono. And that's something that everybody can understand. It's not a matter of race, it's not a matter of culture, it's a matter of deep humanity that we have to be aiming at. So as we construct or reconstruct our nation, we always have to be mindful of that change as well. Soaked into our policies. Switching from die to ora. That's where, as far as I'm concerned, where it has to begin. Thank you.
Mahalo Poka. Before Palani speaks, if we could have the next question, I just step up to the mic so your mouth will call after.
Aloha kako.
Tita, sorry. Right after Palani gives his mana'o. No, come up to the mic to say yeah. And I'm only saying that because we have 14 minutes left in this time, so we want to maximize the time that we have for your guys' questioning.
You know, I wanted to build on what Hayden was saying. You know, I wrote, as I explained earlier, I was writing music to expound on Hawaiian history as I learned it, to clarify points. And then in a spiritual way, I wrote a song called Voices on the Wind. And it really had a good response. And one day, I got a phone call from Honolulu Skylark is, the DJ, Jacqueline Rossetti, and of course you all know who Kimo Kaho'ano is. Anyway, I got a call from them and they asked me if I could meet with them privately. And I said, sure, you can come down to the Musicians Union. It's parked downstairs and I'll get you in. And they said that we don't want anybody hearing what we're talking about. So I got a soundproof rehearsal room, put a paper up a glass so we could see us meeting. And these were the days when we still played, the radio station still played records. And she asked me if I could bring a couple of records for her. I said, sure. And she was, I'll tell you why. We're getting to this point of DIE. What happened, what she explained, there was, at the time, Keaini, a Hawaii general manager. She didn't like what my song was saying, especially in the last line when I sang, arise in strength and purity and love. She didn't like that. She was telling Skylark, well, Skylark discovered that my record was scratched. And there were 3 songs scratched on it. And that was the one that was brought up. And I said, why did you do that? She doesn't want your record to be played on the radio. And so that's why they needed the extra recordings. She was objecting to me saying, to our Hawaiian people, arise again, arise. So, you know, the battles are fought not just in the legislature, not just in the neighborhood boards, they're fought everywhere. And we as songwriters can say things that speech makers cannot. We can tickle and throttle, you know, the enemy. And that's what I want my music to do, is make, first of all, cause people to think and react. But most important is to teach our people, but the young people. And so when I sing Kawana Napua or do other songs, I involve Halau Kumana and sometimes Halau Rokahi, our immersion schools, and get them to participate. We did that on January 17th, last week Friday. And I was very proud of that Halau Kumana for showing up. And this is wonderful. So we have to show our presence. Never mind what they're doing. They can't silence us. They can't keep us from displaying our loyalty. And anyway, I speak my position is we are a living nation. Our nation never died. Our kingdom never died. We just have to, if we start with resurrecting the kingdom, we can take it from there. I think we got to go back to square one.
Mahalo, Palani, for expressing that most people overlook in this kind of discussions what's actually being attacked in the communities. And musicians and music is definitely one area, and that was a great example. Okay, Tita, mahalo.
Okay, so aloha kako. I just wanted to ask a question because I think there's a lot of ambiguity, you know, that I'm actually experiencing. And there's some things that I wanted to get clarified, you know, which are some general terms that we hear frequently. One of them is sovereign. The other term is sovereignty. And the other is these 2 terms, but how they relate to the judicial or the Black Law Dictionary versus regular dictionary sources. And then there's this other term, Hawaii National. You know, so because I'm Kanaka Maoli, and I love my people, who I am, what we are, what we represent, what we're going to move forward with, you know, I just want to be mindful as to what organizations and how they're coming across, with their information to our Kanaka people. Because it seems that, the American laws and things kind of don't have that common, definition and order. So can you folks explain what they are to me and how you folks are making it work with them?
Mahalo Tita, that is a great question. And actually, I hope by the end of the 12-month series of this, there will be more understanding on those exact things. Terminology and vocabulary, how can you have a discussion if you have mixed vocabulary, right?
Not so much the other topics that are related to it. I just need the clarification as to what these words represent and what they actually are. Because when we are outside of the world, we carry ourselves with the knowledge that we know. And so I'm asking, feed me for it, tell me what it is.
Professor Osorio?
When sovereignty started to be used in our conversations back in the 1970s and 1980s, most people just sort of really understood this as being, as self-government. And one of the first initiatives in this was Kalahui, which actually projected a nation within a nation. You could be sovereign, they believed, and still be an American citizen, so you would have like a dual citizenship. And all Hawaiians would be a part of this country, or any Hawaiian who chose to be sovereign could be a part of this government, and the state of Hawaii would still continue to exist, and there would be a sovereign Kalahui on their own lands with Hawaiian subjects or citizens. Since then, we've really come to learn and know more about what these terms actually mean. And sovereign really is a very specific thing, and it says exactly where the power, where the belonging is rooted. And there's really two places in Hawaii's history where we see that word have meaning. The sovereign was the queen, or the king, Kamehameha, sovereign. The lands, essentially, all ownership of land came out of Kamehameha's sovereignty and eventually by law became the lands of the kingdom. In more recent years, we have seen people use the people as sovereign, the people of the government. So we need to be really, really clear that when we say sovereign today, we shouldn't be talking about different kinds of forms of government. We're not really talking about being a Native American tribe within, that's a different kind of relationship. And people who are Native American tribes do not have complete ownership of their own lands, and they don't have complete control of their destinies. That is, so we want to be really careful. When we say sovereign now, we really do mean independent, separate, distinct. All right. Finally, Hawaiian national. When the Hawaiian Kingdom was in operation, when we had a government, we had basically two kinds of citizens, subjects. Those who were native and those who were not. Because the Hawaiian Kingdom allowed people who were not Kanaka Maoli to become subjects of the king by swearing allegiance to the king, by being literate, by paying their taxes and following the laws. So in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, before the Bayonet Constitution, and actually even after it, there were not just native subjects who were entitled to vote and participate in government, but non-natives. A few thousand Haole, a few hundred Chinese, you get what I'm saying. So those people were actually, Hawaii nationals. And a Kanaka Maoli would be a Hawaii national, but also he would be a Kanaka Maoli. And those are different things. As a Hawaii national, you have the rights to participate in the Hawaiian government. And today, we could, if we resurrected the kingdom, if we resurrected that independent country, we could have such a society as well, offering citizenship, if we chose, right, to those who are not Hawaiian. So it would be possible today to have people living here who were Hawaii nationals, American citizens, Japanese citizens, all living in Hawaii and operating here. And we could have that under a sovereign, independent government. However, I don't think you could have that kind of situation if Hawaiians were recognized as a Native American tribe. It would be a very different kind of direction. Is that pretty clear?
Yes. It gives a lot of definitions, but I think I also would like it to be enhanced a little further if it was just more so on the judicial end. Because as far as what I've collected or have heard, you know, the actual sovereignty term is a secondary citizen versus the U.S. United States citizenship. So I think it classes each other, you know, and I just want clarification, so I would lead to all you folks as my elders, you know, for Mana'o and guidance.
Mahalo. Just to let everyone know, in here we have about 3 minutes left till our time is over, and this one always happens. Yeah, we always run out of time, never have enough time to do this. So we can either take someone who can either further clarify or say something different to what Professor Osorio has said, and then have time for one more question.
Yeah, very quickly, it all depends what dictionary you're reading. If it's an international dictionary, it has a very clear meaning. When you go to the United States, they reinterpret just the word sovereignty. Sovereignty generally means that there is no higher legislature but God. Now, the Americans say, oh, we'll put in between that the U.S. Congress. And the Congress shall identify who are the sovereigns. It's just like who is a Hawaiian. You using a cultural dictionary, somebody who practices a culture, or you're using a religious dictionary, or you're using a racial dictionary, or you're using a political dictionary. It all depends who is speaking and what dictionary you use at that time. That's the short answer. There's a long answer, but that's the short answer.
Mahalo, we'll take one more question, and if we still have time for that, we'll take more.
Aloha kako. My name is Ken Koike. I'm a biblical naturopath and farm project coordinator for the Mental Health Center in Wai'anae. And I had the privilege of meeting Uncle Kioni and Uncle Poka when I just wanted to answer some really basic questions. Because I've heard of just recently this the Kauinoa and now this Kanai Olovalu. And I didn't know about this Native Hawaiian Convention that you folks had informed me had taken place and unfortunately never got funded to its final fulfillment. And so I guess growing up here in Hawaii, seeing all of the conflict and the conflict of interest that the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, being an entity created by the state of Hawaii, who obviously is under the United States currently, is supposed to help with sovereignty, or at least bringing together voices. Understanding again the conflict of interest of the Department of Hawaiian Homelands for the same reasons. Can you please just tell us, yeah, if OHA is truly well-intentioned in bringing about these voices, and that we've had this Native Hawaiian Convention basically do what La Hui wanted, was bring the voices from around the state, including the mainland, to consensus. How can we most expediently just get this done without offending our people, you know, with notices if you don't sign up, we're not going to count you and that kind of stuff? If this Native Hawaiian Convention just needs to have a little more funding to complete the consensus and to consolidate the people in bringing about a body politic that I think she's talking about, right? She wants sovereignty to have weight in court, in policy decisions of what Glenn was talking about, right? That we are not going to move from being an occupied nation, having no representation until these things happen. Can you please tell us, what's the fastest way? We can just get it done.
Mahalo, mahalo. And since we're over time, I guess this is the last answer that we will be able to give tonight.
The fastest and best way is an informed electorate, an informed electorate. To prevent rush decisions that only perpetuate the status quo. This series that is being put on for the next 12 weeks, I hope is going to serve the purpose of getting people's questions answered. It's an incredibly complex construct on what we're dealing with. Just the question that John raised, not question, about whatever the eventual sovereignty model is, will it be inclusive? Here's what's running through people. Do I have to give up my U.S. citizenship? What will that model be like? Let me say that I think Hawaiians are generally in pretty good shape culturally right now and on the rise and getting better. So a cultural nation already exists. It gets healthier and healthier. Believe it or not, economically, Hawaiians have tremendous capacity that they never had before right now between the Elite Trust, OHA, and Department of Homelands. So if we can connect the dots, as Kamau is working on, economically, so that we spend most of our time with the most troublesome aspect, the biggest challenge, which is talk about political sovereignty and what to do about what kind of political flag will Hawaiians begin to plant. And you know, it's not just a question for Hawaiians, because I really believe as Hawaiians go, so will Hawaii. It has to be. Reconciliation is important to everybody in Hawaii. It's especially important if you're not Hawaiian. Because where we go, that's where the police is going to go. So hopefully we will be, at least in the part of the process that Hawaiians will initiate initially. Hopefully we'll do it by casting informed, or making informed decisions, by educating ourselves, because it is very complex.
Mahalo, Trustee Apo. Since she hasn't spoken at all during this period here, as we'll have our kaina up here, Ulilani, go ahead and give us our closing statement for this, and then I'll let each of you just say goodnight.
Aloha. I teach Hawaiian Studies 107 at the community college, and so every semester I have a new audience, and I see their eyes open and their countenance change as they listen to more of our own history. Yeah. And in one of the recent conversations I've had with community members, yeah, she said, the overthrow is still having effects today on our people. Yeah, she said, we're currently experiencing historical PTSD. Yeah, post-traumatic stress disorder. Yeah. And this PTSD, yeah, if any of you are familiar with PTSD, you can't give one timeline on how long it takes to heal. Yeah, like, oh yeah, 6 months, we're good to go. Yeah, and so part of that healing is healing our current generation, yeah, our youth. They're all on their phones, they all get their iPad. 2-year-old, 1-year-old know how to work with better than you. Yeah, they're distracted by electronics, they're distracted by things that in the grand scheme of life and the world don't matter. Yeah. They don't feed us the way the Aina feeds us. Yeah. And so part of that PTSD and the continued PTSD is the education system, where they have to attain certain goals in order to continuously get funding. And when they have that kind of education, their focus again is on the DIE. Yeah. And so when they take courses in Hawaiian Studies, or they're in the charter schools, and they get a better representation, a fuller history represented to them, they start to regrow this na'au that is stronger. Yeah, and I see it in my students. I talk to them about voyaging, and oh my gosh, they're like, yeah, my ancestors were brilliant. They were capable. Yeah. And oh my gosh, our kingdom was awesome. Yeah, it was the actions of our elite that actually inspired the rest of the world to create human rights. And when they learn these things, then they get a little bit more confident in not just looking for a leader to follow in the sovereignty movement, but being a leader. Yeah, and knowing how to make decisions and identifying which model is most useful for them. And I think that is part of the organizing that we need to do to protect our EV and to protect, you know, curriculum. Yeah, they cannot tell us we can't talk about, you know, voyaging or Halo or what, you know, whatever curriculum we want to cover. And in that kind of heating of the Na'o, that is when we become a little bit more united. Yeah, we're not going to enter all the same door, but I believe that we will know where Pono sits. Yeah, Pono sits here, and we're going to take different avenues, and that's okay. Yeah, because everybody thinks, oh, we got to do it one way. Our Kupuna never did everything one way. In fact, we never even have only one name for one plan. Yeah, we did it how it fit best regionally, yeah, island by island, and that's okay, and we got to be okay with that. Yeah, and so I think the more we empower the youth to look away from the devices, I use mine too, don't worry, I use mine, but to look away from our devices when we have to contribute to the movements and the healings that we can contribute to, yeah, to be able to confidently recognize our kuleana, yeah, not, oh, guess at what my kuleana is. Okay, well, Hawaiians planted kalo, so I should plant kalo. But not all Hawaiians are farmers, and you know, we got to know how to identify and not be, we were only farmers, we were only fishermen. You know, we were great scientists, we were great engineers. Okay, we need to expand our images of who our kupuna were and what we are capable of doing. And I think in rediscovering our past, yeah, and reinventing what we're capable of, we will be better suited to lead all together rather than just look at one. Yeah, oh, show me what's to go. No, that was never how our kupuna did it, so that's not really how we should be doing it. Yeah, we should all be confident so that if, you know, somebody trying to interview you, you don't gotta say, oh, well, so-and-so said this. No, you're gonna be, no, Liligo Kalani did this, Kalakaua did this, Kamehame the First did this, Kuali'i did this, Umi did this, yeah, and use our own stories to tell, you know, whoever it is that this is why we do it.
Mahalo, Ike, you know, out of respect for the people who have to malama this hale, it is almost 10 o'clock at night, and we do have to kind of exit Kapolei High School at an hour, which our Olelo staff and the staff of Kapolei can actually go home to their families. Yeah, and that's really important for us as guests in this hale, because this hale does not actually belong to any of us. And so our aloha for our Kapolei High School personnel who has graciously left this place. So graciously allowed us to stay in this hale. Again, we only have a little bit more time before we're actually supposed to be cleaned up and out. So I wanted to just close by saying this is not the end of this discussion, this is the first. All of these people that you see on this panel are public figures that have email address, Facebook pages, contact numbers. They're easy to find, if not in direct physical person, according to their, with their social media and with their emails and phone numbers. So please take this as an opportunity to aloha the information that they have given tonight and shared, and look forward to the next series, which will happen next month in February, the last Tuesday of the month. Remember, it's a short month now. So the third Tuesday, excuse me, the third Tuesday of the month. And we will be back here at Kapolei High School, ready with a new set of panelists and information for all of us to digest, yeah? So, without further ado, and I'm sorry panelists, I'm not going to let you, because you guys are all going to take 10 minutes each, I know already. I've known you guys all long enough. But hopefully we are all satisfied. If we can cool kako, we can make a ohana, yeah?
Holy
see you all back next month.
He's watching his people. They're giving, their hearts full of laughter and song. Someday he shall share with the grandchild who can what we his coconut hat now, just like Tutu Krabbe. We